It's happy times and places in which I, Toby Hadoke, get a friend to choose a Doctor Who story for me, and I have to guess what their favourite things about it are.
Hello Toby, this is Jim Sangster. You know that guy from Liverpool who keeps popping up on the DVD extras? The story I've chosen for you to watch is the very first one. We're going to watch the Cavemen episodes. You know, the ones some older fans call the Tribe of Gum.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to part 4 of Doctor Who. The 4th ever episode and the final episode of the first story, which is either called An Unearthly Child. That's what I call all 4, even though, strictly speaking, I know that really only refers to the first episode. Some people call it 100,000 BC. I don't, because that's relatively new, and like the old mother, I reject new things just on principle, and to others it's the Tribe of Gum, and that's what Jim Sangster, my guest, refers to it as in the emails that he sent me, so that's what he thinks it's called, but whatever. If I refer to it of any of those 3 things, you know what I mean, so you don't need to go, I think you'll find, because it's a waste of your time and mine. So, I record this deep in the pits of the plague, and I have to confess I'm feeling slightly underwhelmed today. I don't think I've achieved enough, I haven't exercised enough, and I've eaten rubbish. And that sometimes happens at the moment, so I've turned to Doctor Who to cheer me up. So, the timing is good, because I was regretting not doing this last night when I did episodes 2 and 3. But I've had a message from Andrew East, who hoped he wasn't too late, and you weren't, Andrew. That I'm gonna read now, so I'm not cheating over the episode. Dear Toby, you may remember that I posted a message on your Patreon feed asking if you would be interested in the thoughts of my 12-year-old son Toby, poor fellow, on the Tribe of Gum. I hadn't realised you'd given a deadline of that week for comments. Anyway, blah-de-blah-de-blah. My wife and I are both teachers, as well as my 2 children coping with their own online learning. I'm hoping I'm not too late with Toby's thoughts, as he was quite excited about featuring in the podcast, although I'm aware it's now 3 weeks later. It's fine, Andrew, it's fine. I do hope you can find some way of including his ideas. I'm gonna! Toby is big into history, and so one of his principal takeaways from the story was the presentation of the caveman tribe. Hello, Toby, by the way. And this Toby liked the caveman tribe too. His favourite thing in the story was the fact that the cavemen have a backstory, as he put it. You feel like they're proper characters because you know about what has happened to them before the story. However, he was also a little disappointed in what he feels are historical inaccuracies. Now, I'm not an expert, and he actually knows more than me, as he seems to absorb historical information like a sponge, so I can't vouch for the accuracy of this, but Toby reckons the tribe are too settled. He reckons that if they all have already had fire, then they should have moved on to farming. He believes that when tribes first had fire, they were nomadic, but this tribe seemed to be settled in one place. As I say, I've no idea if this is true, and I'm sure knowledge has moved on since this was written in 1963, but I thought it interesting and indicative of the show's original educational remit that it prompted these thoughts in him. Yeah, and 2 viewers did actually write about some things they thought inaccurate about the tribe at the time. So that's very interesting. But also, I would say Toby's probably right, because in my experience, I thought one of the things about getting older was you're able to tell kids that they're wrong about stuff because you're older and you know things. And I increasingly find my children actually know more about things than I do, because they're still of an age where they can learn new things, whereas my head is sort of slightly fossilized. The one thing I thought you'd be able to do as a grown-up, which is be right all the time, just by dint of you being grown up, is not actually true. So, Toby, I think you're probably right, and I like the application here. We're on to the Daleks now, and one thing he's noticed is the shift in relationship between Ian and the Doctor, who, in the Tribe of Gum, are quite antagonistic towards each other, but in the Daleks, Ian starts to respond more to what the Doctor says. I apologise if it's too late. It's not, and want to get Toby's thoughts on it. You're welcome, Andrew, and Toby too. Very interested in your thoughts. I think those are great observations, and yes, the cave people do have a backstory, and your historical thoughts there, Toby, are very educational. You're never too young to learn, which is something the old mother should have been responsive to. Instead, she got a stone in the face. So, well, thanks to Andrew and to Toby for that. Always good to hear from people, especially the young. Right, we're going to crack on with episode 4. I hope you have it all ready and lined up. Let's see what we make of the Firemaker. Press play now. So here we go. Episode 4 of, I suppose it's a 3-parter because the first part has nothing to do with it. Whatever. No, but it's one production block, isn't it? But then again, so is Mission to the Unknown and Galaxy 4. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Who cares? We all know what we mean. We all know what we're watching. Now, fans of Jeremy Young would have hoped that because he got the big close-up at the end of... there's no forest set here, of course, because they don't need the forest set this week, so Ian's in front of a drape. But we don't get the close-up of Jeremy Young. Instead, we straight to the cave, and Howard Lang gets the first line. And because the guest cast are credited in order of appearance, old Hawg, who is definitely the smallest guest character, gets top billing, which means that Jeremy Young, who is billed as the main guest star in the Radio Times, never gets top billing because of the way that the credits work. I am probably the only person that cares. Now, interestingly, of course, they were taking Tsar to the TARDIS in order to get antibiotics to treat him, but they actually never get that far, but he gets better anyway. So it just goes to show the anti-vaxxers are correct. No, not at all. Can you imagine? Tsar does not want to go to the TARDIS for antibiotics. Tsar thinks it's all a conspiracy to microchip the tribe of Gum. The parallels. Well, we do seem to be being plunged into prehistoric times once again. It's just because Jim that said he thought in his appraisal of this that Cal was sort of totally evil. I feel some sympathy for Cal. He's trying to survive, and he's not malicious. I mean, I think I'd have killed the old mother. She was horrible. and he does play it slightly guilelessly. You know, he's slightly forlorn. But this is great work from the Doctor. Sort of going, your knife's rubbish, and Cal, because he's a bit, he's obviously not the Doctor's intellectual equal. Does his sort of Columbo Miss Marple thing of going, you are gathered in. He's gathered everybody in the tribe's tea room and gone. The killer is in this very room. But he did it very cleverly by going, your knife's not very good. So this is lovely stuff from the Doctor, showing his keen intelligence, and I like the little bit of collusion with Ian there, where he sort of says, right, just follow what I'm doing, and let's do a pile-on. Let's do which again, I'm in this current age of people ganging up on people. Again, I do feel a little bit of sympathy for Cal here. Even though he said he got himself to blame, I don't like mob justice. I do like the way Derek Newark's sort of, he's chewing a wasp to give him a sort of grimacy, almost animalistic quality. And what's even better, of course, is that in a conventional narrative, Tsar would be kind of like, okay, thanks very much. He said he shoves Ian out of the way, because our morality, where if somebody helps us out, we sort of acknowledge that and perhaps give them what they want. He goes, okay, well, you've given me a profound line about Cal not being stronger than the whole tribe. Now I'm going to stick you in the Cave of Skulls again, which and I think showing that again, it goes to how well I think the cavemen are done here, as well as the sort of guttural language and the slightly different thought patterns, but like the thing about the animal taking away the axe in its skull and all that sort of stuff. You have that different morality about, well, just because they've helped me out doesn't mean we're all mates now. Do you know what I mean? And it sort of plays into that idea that in these early years, all of these characters are on the run. Essentially, they're trying to get back to 20th century Earth, really, but and the ship is their lifeline. And essentially, the adventures are the annoying things that happen in between them trying to get back to the ship, which is their only link with civilization. Which means our travellers are slightly, sort of at sea, which is really perilous, because it means you can never relax within the adventure, because the adventure isn't actually the bigger picture. And even though that it's not played as a story arc or a build up towards a season climax where they somehow get closer to their goal or anything, they don't do it like that. It's even though it is one continuous adventure, because we get a cliffhanger at the end of even every story. It does feel like that's an underlying dramatic sort of underscore to the adventure of the week, is that these are marooned, lost souls, and I do hope that some people watching are giving this. Maybe people are different. People's experiences are different, but my experience and my feeling amongst friends and fans is that these cave people episodes are not given much heed. The way that Alethea Charlton there does that, I do not understand, is superb. And they're sort of, they're learning about society. This is very good. But this is not a mawkish thing where people from our time come and wag their fingers at people from the past and they learn how to be better. But it shows that we are creatures who evolve, and with a little bit of prompting from the time travelers, Zar is working out the more effective way to be leader. But I just spilt my drink. He's a leader, and I don't want to stop the podcast. Oh, he's a leader who I might have to hang on. There was a recording break while the scene had to be reset to clear up the drink that the narrator dropped. Anyway, oh dear. Anyway, sorry, apologies for that technical glitch. Now, how easy is it to make fire? Because it was always a thing at school. Oh yeah, you make fire by rubbing two sticks together. But I remember us all having a go, and we never pulled it off. But at least they show it's hard. And Ian really does put a load of labour into it. I watched Castaway with Tom Hanks the other day, which, funnily enough, has a similar quest for fire. And again, it shows how much effort he really has to go into to do that. But obviously, it is possible, because that's how we got fire. But I've never pulled it off myself. Unfortunately, I live in a time when one doesn't have to, but isn't it extraordinary how something that we take so for granted. And look, yes, the Doctor is the leader of the tribe. That's very, very interesting because he. I remember there's a wonderful blog that became a book called Adventures with the Wife in Space by Neil Perryman and his wife Sue, where Sue sort of says of this era it should be called Ian because he's very much the hero. Look at Hartnell's keen intelligence and sort of following the action there. He's slightly patronising to the caver. Yes, dear, we're doing this for you, but they are slower on the uptake, the cave people, and yes, the Firemaker is the least important because we can all make fire. But of course, if this pandemic had taken over, how many of us had civilization collapsed? How many of us that think of ourselves as being very clever and able to do important things in the 21st century? I love that scene in the original Survivors when Peter Copley and Carolyn Seymour have a chat, and he goes, how would you make a candle? All of these things that we think of are really simple. Other people do for us. I couldn't make a fire. I couldn't make a candle. It's a lesson in sort of pragmatic politics as well. And Hawgs are right. Hawg changes like the wind, this common body like to a vagabond flag upon the stream. And also, and he uses his daughter as a sort of bargaining chip as well. The roommate fire, you can have my daughter. Charming. Again, different morality. And is this so? I don't know who this extra is, but is the first person to die on screen, pretty much in Doctor Who. There's fire in the studio, interestingly, because stop saying interesting. There's no visual effects person credited for this episode. They've stopped with the credit special effects by the visual effects department of the BBC, even though Jim Ward supervised the visual effects, and I think it's something like the demarcation of which department at the BBC was allowed to use fire, and one had a fire certificate, and I think the design department didn't, so visual effects had to because they were allowed to use fire. I mean, it sounds nonsense, doesn't it? Oh yeah, well, and fire. I mean, fire in the studio is that wasn't a straightforward thing, nor of course was a fight, which is why we're gonna close in on the Travellers, and then we're going to go to a film studio for beautifully lit fight scene that can be done with stunt doubles, Billy Cornelius and Derek Ware, who was one of the first Doctor Who people I met because he was the swordmaster of a Ludlow Festival play that my brother was in, which have I talked of before on this. And I love this fight because they bite each other. It's pretty grim. And of course they revealed that they, because they get a bit down and dirty, they have to be fairly blatant that they have caveman pants, which they probably wouldn't have done at the time. There's all sorts of things they wouldn't have done at the time. I think the set looks great, the light looks great, the cutaways to close-ups of the Travellers are good, but this is a really grim, and I like the way the noises that they make that are quite, because fighting is horrible. And it doesn't always sound nice, and of course, added to the fact that these are sort of savage early men, I think they really do it well. And yeah, Derek Ware holds a place in my heart because he was the first sort of proper Doctor Who person I was in the vicinity of. Although I didn't meet him that time, but he then came back to Ludlow, and I was working, so he came to ask for tea, and I then met him a few times later. I actually suggested him for the DVD commentary for The Mind of Evil, which I think one of the first time, certainly the first time we've done a commentary. I love that scream that Jeremy Young does. Famously, of course, there was supposed to be the sound of stories change, whether it was a cabbage with a hammer, with a mallet, or various different things, the sound of a crushing skull. which was removed. Also, I think there's a suggestion that you're supposed to see a close-up of the damage that had been done. It works just as well without. I love the way Derek Newick drags the dead body off, really, and his leg goes up. It's really sort of unnatural and grim, and shows the real sort of ugliness of death when death often and fighting often on television is quite slick and well choreographed. I think that's a fantastic moment, and I'm especially pleased that because Derek Ware was my first sort of meet with someone from Doctor Who, that of course that he was involved with the very first story. I mean, extraordinary. And very pleasing, and he was a lovely man, Derek, who did founded Hadoke, the stunt agency, but worked in films as well. Worked on the Italian Job, and was a lovely guy. Derek Ware, that is, and the fire looks great on screen as well. It's a fantastic visual fire, but yeah, that fight is pretty uncompromising and very, very well done. It's a showpiece moment. I think the fight was overseen by Douglas Camfield. I've got a bugbear here where on IMDb, and therefore as a result in various quizzes, Douglas Camfield is credited as director alongside Waris Hussain. For production assistant oversees a scene or an aspect of production. They're doing that as part of their role as production assistant. It doesn't suddenly mean they're co-director. And I think that's just somebody showing off on IMDb going, I read a thing where it said Douglas Camfield directed a scene, therefore he is director of this, like Waris is saying. Well, okay, Derek Newick co-wrote it because he added some of his lines. David Whittaker co-wrote it. I mean, you could add all sorts of lists of people because they contribute over the course of a production. This is directed by Waris Hussain. It is written by Anthony Coburn. Despite the fact that bits were done by other people. It's just, I'm not necessarily sure democracy is a good thing when it comes to facts being written up on websites like Wikipedia and IMDb, because everyone has their own sort of funny little hills to die on, and it sort of muddies the straightforwardness in order that people can do their own I think you'll finds, which I never think are particularly helpful, and I think say more about the person doing it than the truth behind the story. But that's my own hill that I die on. So I'm aware that I could be hoisted by my own petard on that one. They do get lovely and grubby here, and oh yes, practical lamb chops, I think. That's very good. It reminds me of the story of the actor. Have I told this? Who's in the play, and he goes, you working, love? Yes. What are you doing? Is it a good play? No, it's a terrible play. Good company? No, awful company. Oh. Good money? No, the money is terrible. Why are you doing it then? There's a practical sandwich in Act 2. And it's either here or, and I think it might be more likely the episode 2, because he's eating something in episode 2 as well, that Derek Newick got some of the fat from the food and put it in his wig. Oh no, you can see his wig's a bit manky there. Because he thought the wig looked a bit pristine, which I think is a lovely idea, but I mean, it wouldn't have done much for the smell in the studio. It must have been pretty grim. No wonder everybody smoked, because must have got a bit stinky. But that fire looks great. That's Carol Ann Ford's own costume, isn't it? Because she had a different costume in the pilot, and that's part of a suit. So she had matching trousers, and they were, I think, black and orange. Is it Mary Quant? I think. So she brought. I think the matching trousers as well would have been pretty out there. But yeah, I think she brought that in herself. I love that image of the skull with the flame sticking out. That is, I mean, it's so simple, such a simple idea, and yet it looks brilliant in the black and white. And you actually, again, sometimes I think things that portray savages, for want of a better phrase can be a bit sort of patronising, and not particularly convincing. But I totally buy that these cave people would be pretty alarmed by this sight, which is pretty awful. And that's a fantastic shot, and yeah, they're doing a good job there. Although, yes, why? And they don't, and they do eventually see through it, because it's not that convincing a trick. Going, yes, those skulls on sticks, they are us. They could have at least put Susan's top on one of the sticks, or with William Russell's shirt or something. And we're on film here, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it must be. But it's great because, yes, so instead of the story, which would now probably end with, the cavemen all sitting around the fire going, "You've given us fire, Doctor, you are the stuff of legend. I know, aren't I?" It's which... and everybody patting themselves on the back, and the doctor, and it go, "Doctor, it's almost like you've helped the start of mankind." I know, because I'm involved in everything. Instead, it's, "You're pesky travellers, and you're going to escape by the skin of your teeth," which I think is much more my image of Doctor Who as a sort of series of random accidents. And I love it when the Doctor influences big things, but again, more because of more by accident rather than design, and not because the Doctor is nearly a god. And here's, of course, the famous they're running on the spot and having the branches rubbed past their face, because to make better use of the space. Now, these cave men here are among them are 8 unidentified extras. We don't have the paperwork saying who they are, but certain actors over the years have said they were among them. Roger Hammond, Francis Bacon in The Chase, and Dr. Runciman in Mordred Undead. Norman Jones, Major Baker in Doctor and the Silurians, Chris Ong in The Abominable Snowman, Hieronymus in The Mask of Mandragora, both claimed on separate occasions to have been a caveman in the first William Hartnell one, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be, very early in their careers. So who knows who else is hidden among them? It's very difficult to make them out, sadly. You don't really get, and that shot of the TARDIS going, the spears flying through it, was done when they did the opening shots, the first bits of model work for the production on different days to when they did the stuff with the cave people. And there we go. So the last thing we see of the nice caveman Tsar is the fact that they're chasing the Doctor and chucking spears at them, because look how dishevelled they are. I think that's great. They're flying from peril to peril, and they're out of the frying pan or out of the Firemaker into the frying pan, even in the frying pan of Skaro. And of course, I remember watching this as part of the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, being quite surprised that it ended on a cliffhanger. That was the first inkling I had that this was a sort of an adventure in time and space and time, and it's a lovely model we get of a glimpse of the petrified forest. The fire has killed us all on the planet Skaro, and I just love the visuals of this crew. Hartnell looks great. That wig is absolutely terrific. He had a birthmark, that was covered by makeup every week, yeah, so I remember 5 Faces of Doctor Who going, oh gosh, it finished. And now, of course, and there's no explanation. It's just no. Next week it's Patrick Troughton in the Crotons, but it's an extra onus on the writer to go, when you finish the story, you have to lead into the next one. And Doctor Who does it with and they don't always do it, to be fair, and they do it with varying degrees of success, I would say. But there we go. That is I do like a cliffhanger at the end of a. I was just thinking about. There's one at the end of 4 to Doomsday, isn't there? And there's one at the end of Frontiers. So it's not just confined to the Hartnell era. Derek Ware got a credit there as well. And here we are. That is the end of the first ever Doctor Who story. I'm very pleased Jim chose that. I thought that was a good and an interesting choice. And I have to choose my favourite thing about episode 4 and a bonus thing. Well, my favourite thing for episode 4 has got to be the fight. I think it's really, really good. The fact that it's on film means it looks a bit extra. It's dirty. It's screechy. It's ugly. And deliberately all of those things, which I think is very bold at a time when often, fights had to look look quite choreographed. I think that was admirably underhand in places, biting and screeching, and Jeremy Young's final screech, that sort of agonized animalistic caterwaul is terrific. So yeah, that's my easy choice for part 4. And as for the overall thing, that's hard. I think that idea that ties in with the grubbiness, that ties in with the testy relationship that they all have, that ties in with that last cliffhanger. I think I'm going to blow it with Jim because I think I'm being slightly too tenuously linked and abstract. But this idea that this is an adventure, this whole situation is an adventure for all of these 4 people, and that they're on the run. Even within the story, the TARDIS is sanctuary and everything else is dangerous, and that this is a sort of grubby seat of the pants, out of the frying pan into the fire, continuous weekly rocket from jeopardy to jeopardy to jeopardy, and that even when a single story is over, the story isn't over, because the story is these people are cut off. Like Susan and the Doctor say they are in the first episode, Ian and Barbara are now cut off from what we know and trying to get back to us. I wonder if Jim will choose Waris Hussein, whose direction is superb, but I can't really choose that because I think I alluded to it when I chose my thing for episode 2, and I could have chosen the music, but Jim has already chosen that, so. I think it had to be that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jim chooses the fight. His bonus thing, I think, is gonna do for me. But if he does choose the fight, that means I'm equal with him. Let's see. Wow.
The best thing about the Firemaker is that fight at the end between Cal and Tsar. It's often difficult to be sure who's who, and it's proper violent, especially for the loser. Splat. And finally, my bestest thing of the whole story. Well, it has to be William Hartnell, doesn't it? I'm sure you've picked this. By episode 3, he's telling Barbara that fear makes companions of us all, and it's the first time he's shown any kind of compassion. But in episode 4, he drops the space steptoe act and becomes the smartest man in the room, in the way he tricks Cal into exposing himself as the murderer of Old Mother. Finally, he's the hero we need him to be. He's not Dr. Foreman anymore, he's Doctor Who. So that's that. Hope you enjoyed it.
Do you know sometimes when you read an article or you look at a television programme and you go, why didn't they think of that? Or why did they do that? That seems so obvious to do that instead. As soon as he said, just as he said, I thought, it's William Hartnell. Of course it's going to be William Hartnell. It's the first story. He's the first Doctor. I highlighted loads of brilliant things he does, from the way that he looks to the way that he outsmarts Cal. And that journey that he goes on, and the fact that he is they point out him as the leader. It's obvious that it's William Hartnell, and that William Hartnell is such a key to the success of that story. And I chose stupid threads that I all tied together. he was hiding in plain sight, and it's an object lesson in overthinking and sometimes not seeing the wood for the trees, but mostly because sometimes when you have an article published and you've read it a million times, and then there's a line that you put just as a sort of placeholder, so you hadn't paid it much attention, and then when it's in black and white, you go, "Oh no, I didn't!" And people go, "Well, that's an obvious mistake. It's only obvious if you're looking for it." And it's only obvious the minute, no, in fact, the second before he said it, it was obvious to me. Whilst I was talking to you and choosing, it wasn't obvious to me. Oh, I'm furious with myself because I could have won this one. And I missed an open goal there. So I get a tie. I get a score draw 2-2, which I think is about the best I've done. Was I similar with Terror of the Autons with Richard Marson? But I'm kicking myself there. I could have. Even Jim thought I was going to get that. The quest continues. So I suppose it's appropriate. I'll leave it on a cliffhanger. Will I ever get more than my guest? Let's hear what Jim has to say about himself, because he's a very creative and interesting man, and I'd very much like you, if you don't know him, to be introduced to him and what he does.
I've just started a blog called escapetodanger.net, where I'm reading all of the Target Doctor Who books in publication order, and I've just got proper grumpy about the Ice Warriors, so I'm probably going to be excommunicated from fandom anytime soon. Hope you're well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, I'm fascinated to see why he's grumpy about the Ice Warriors. In fact, it's become quite fashionable to knock the Ice Warriors full stop, even the TV version. And I remember when it was missing and everyone was desperate to see it. And I still like the Ice Warriors, but actually nobody's chosen it for this yet. So that's something to look forward to. Fire and ice. We'll get round to it eventually. I'm annoyed I blew that. Sometimes stop, think, and you'll see the truth. And I didn't do that. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter. It's the journey that buffets us from one episode to the next. So thanks for joining me for this. I've talked for half an hour rather than sat glumly on the sofa thinking about all the things I haven't achieved today and the pestilence that surrounds us. And so that is something. Okay, I'm going to go and light a fire because I want to feel well capable in that. Thank you for joining me. Thanks to Jim Sangster, and I'll see you next time.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
Do you know, actually, just as I've been saving that, I've been thinking, I do this all the time. I find myself going, oh, I need to fixate on that thing that annoys me about a certain thing that happens in the writing up and the truth of Doctor Who, because it has to be right. And in the end, I end up doing the very thing that the people that annoy me do. And I did it in a quiz the other day where there was a bit where, and it was about this actually, it was about Douglas Camfield. How many Hartnell stories did he direct? And I just was going, leave it, Toby, it doesn't matter. And I went, oh yeah, but hang on, because this says this and this is it. And I interfered, and it made me feel like an annoying smart. It made me feel like I probably came across as an annoying smartass. Whereas if I just shut up and left it, it all would have been fine because other people would have sorted it out, and I'd have come away from that quiz and not then spent the evening regretting my own I think you're finding, which I hate when other people do. And you know, who knows, the person that put Douglas Camfield on IMDb, I've characterised them as going, oh, I found out a thing, aren't I clever? They could have been instead. Why don't I go, oh, it's somebody who's gone, oh, yeah, I read about Douglas Camfield directing that scene, so that's a really interesting nugget. So I'll go on IMDb and I'll put that. It could have been really enthusiastic. It could have been they're trying to commit to the great, you know, the sum of knowledge. It could have been something they did with joy and in a scholastic or an historical approach. I disagree with their findings, maybe, but yeah. So that's just a reminder to myself. I have to hold my hands up and go. And even as I was saying it in the episode, actually, I was going, why am I doing that? And I didn't want to then come to have to edit this and listen to myself doing something that annoys me and then put it out there and then spend the rest of the day worrying that I'd put it out there with me doing something that had annoyed me. So I've said before you've got to the closing titles that bit, if that annoyed you, yeah, it annoyed me too. And it annoyed me as I was saying it. And yet I still said it. I don't know what that proves, but I think I feel better for getting it off my chest. I mean, none of it really matters. I mean, they were all getting carried away about fire 100,000 years ago. They're all dead now, aren't they? So this will all be dust in the wind. But nonetheless, it seems things do seem terribly important at the time, don't they? Anyway, I hope all I've done with your time is to make it pass slightly quicker, even if it's just helped you go, well, at least I'm not hit. At least I'm not that guy. You're not. But I'd be very pleased if you joined that guy next time he has verbal diarrhea and self-abasement in equal measure, which is what this podcast should be called. And look forward to the next episode of Verbal Diarrhea and Self-Abasement with me, Toby Hadoke. Thank you very much, and good night. Thanks for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Jim Sangster, who is on Twitter at MonsterMaker, monster_maker, both M's are capitals. This podcast has its own Twitter feed as well, Toby Hadoke's Time Travels, at Hadoke Podcasts. Please follow there. And do you know what? My patrons are good patrons. They're better than Cal's patrons, and they include Andrew, Luke Atkins, Peter Adamson, Will Brooks, Richard Byatt, Paul Caddington, Andy Case, Richard Chalk, John Curley, Mark Dakin, Ian Gillespie, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, Dave Hoskin, Jessica Jones, Andrew Jordan, Clive Lewis, Guy Lambert, James Lark, David Matthewman, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Matthew Newton, Melvin Pena, Keith Pirry, Dylan Rees, John Rivers, Keith Say, Len Stewart, Nick Temple, Sabrina Terabassi, Reynard Toombs, and Apollo C. Vermouth. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates. You can become a patron for as little as £3 a month, although you are charged immediately. Be warned, it's a new system, but that means you get access straight away to exclusive and to early releases, material that nobody else gets hold of, and higher tiers even qualify for an exciting badge, or possibly 5. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. If you don't want to do a monthly thing, you can just do a one-off donation at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. But if you can't afford to do either, and that's completely understandable, I know times are tough, I'm just grateful to you for listening and for boosting my numbers. Thank you ever so much. But if you want to do a little bit of keyboard magic by rating and reviewing these, as many positive comments and as many 5-star reviews as possible really help to make my algorithms better than Cal's algorithms. And do you know what? I really want to have algorithms that are better than Cal's. So please go everywhere you get your podcasts and do that for me. Thanks ever so much. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Toby Hadoke. You can go to my website, www.tobyhadoke.com. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts, as mentioned, are at Hadoke Podcasts. And you can check out my live comedy show, Excess Malarkey. It's been going for 24 years, and since the pandemic has been online at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, and that's at 8 p.m. GMT. Unless you're listening to this once the pandemic is over, and then just look for Excess Malarkey online, and they'll tell you all about the live Tuesday night shows.